facility, either directly connected to this facility or in the surrounding area, maybe have a cluster of buildings. So this is, by far, this is not the final design. Again, it was to show that we had done our homework. It's realistic. We could build it this way. We pulled the show guys on board, and they're going to probably take it in a completely different direction. But again, the idea is we want to demonstrate that we are thinking about expansion. And I'm not going to read these to you. There's a couple of quotes here by some of the folks that have provided endorsements for us. Ben Bova, Pat Rawlings, Michael Carroll, Chris McKay down here says he'd love to take the Spaceward Bound students out there. So, and then I think this is the last slide. Again, just thinking about scaling. You know, there's a bigger opportunity here than just the attraction. And you know, I've pitched to some investors before where they've said, okay, so you're trying to raise, well, I should mention, by the way, the project is $72.5 million. So you're trying to raise this much money. Is there a $200 million play here? Could we go bigger? Could we make more money? Are there other things that we could do? So you think about these things as, I always like to put them on a continuum from more risk to less risk. So, you know, less risk things might be adding additional experiences in the training center or going higher fidelity with certain things, adding settler roles, all the way down to, okay, putting in place the themed restaurant or the themed hotel, or having a rocket racing league operation right there out of the local airport, the Tycho Airport. You know, and if we don't implement these things in the first round, then maybe these are areas for future expansion. So that, in a nutshell, is Innerspace, and there's a lot of, especially with regards to the financial model and the numbers that, you know, are not included in the this presentation because it's kind of watered down. It's non-confidential, but I think this gives you a good idea of the project. So, with that, I think I'll open it up to questions. Anybody have any questions?
You know, how do you avoid, I forget the name of the place, it's a place in New York City, and it's like a Mars-themed restaurant.
Mars 2112? Yes.
How do you avoid the factor?
The what factor?
The tacky factor.
Oh, the tacky factor. Well, for one thing, this is a much bigger budget production than that. The other is that that's really not real science. I mean, you get on this ride thing that warps you off to Mars, and you come out and the aliens feed you, and you know, it's not. Another distinction, a very important distinction, is that the people that put that together don't really want to go to Mars. They were interested in making a profit from a themed restaurant. And I think that's an important distinction. The people that are driving this venture, they want to go to Mars. They're knowledgeable in terms of the technical realities, and they're very interested in making this a technically realistic attraction. Yes?
What's the assumed Mars literacy of the average demographic?
It's a good question. Well, certainly they know that Mars exists as
Right.
a planet. You'd be surprised. You know, a lot of these attractions tend to focus them towards the lowest element, you know, assume that they know nothing. And I think that really, that's not completely accurate. I mean, if that's the audience you want, then that's the audience you're going to get. I think that a lot of the people that come to this are going to fall into that space curious category, so they already have some knowledge, they've read about it, maybe they follow NASA. Another thing that I should say, and it was not in this presentation, but what our throughput is. We're looking at 240,000 day visitors per year. Okay, remember, Kennedy Space Center right down the road is running 1.6 million. Okay, 240,000. So it's a much smaller number, and our multi-day guests about 7,500 per year. So, you know, we can be a little bit more selective about the audience that we attract and that we cater to than, say, a Disney or a Universal, where they're all about getting another body through the turnstile and making sure that the experience is at a level for that average guest. So I'm not sure exactly what the the general level of understanding is related to Mars, but certainly would be good data to get.
Thank you.
A couple of technology questions, if
Sure.
they're not classified. I mean, like, have you thought of the technology for simulating the low gravity of Mars? And also, how much have you been thinking about virtual reality?
Well, the first part of the question, yes, we have been thinking about simulating the lower gravity. I don't put that out there when I give presentations too much because there are other attractions that have the simulated gravity, where they put you in a harness and this kind of thing. And so I don't think that that's something that's unique to our attraction. Certainly we're going to have a gravity walk area where you can experience lunar gravity and Martian gravity. The second part, what was the second part of your question?
Virtual reality. I mean, like, at the
Right.
rate that software development is going, if you put like a helmet on where you can have a 3D view of anything in the entire solar system that you can know about or guess about, then that would be almost just as good as actually going into this wild area. This large area, 30,000 square feet.
Right. And so I've got two comments associated with that. One is that for the robotic controls, for these various robots that the guests are going to have as part of their experience, I see a lot of potential for bringing in new technology there, new user interfaces, haptic feedback, new augmented reality systems, partnering with the companies that are developing these technologies to incorporate that into our guest experience, and providing those companies direct feedback from a large number of people that are trying this out. So that's one way that kind of getting into the virtual reality that we can employ. To more directly address your question, I think there's still something to be said for actually going to a place and having that experience as opposed to just plugging into my computer or putting on a headset. Certainly, we're going to try to take advantage of advances in technology as they occur, but do you know of any other places that have readily accessible VR technology with the helmets and all that?
Well, you could have like the best in the world, and you could also maybe develop technology to simulate walking and stuff like that. It might be a bit difficult, but technology is going exponentially. And I actually have one last question. What have you been thinking about simulating trips back to the moon?
Oh, we'd love to do, in fact, that was on the expansion slide, is that we might have a simulated lunar environment, we might have an asteroid. These are all areas for expansion. We're Mars guys, so I think this audience can appreciate that. So we think that the most compelling first guest experience is related to Mars. But certainly in the future, we'd be looking to going to moon and asteroids and Earth orbit and add some other flavors to the experience. Did that answer your question?
Much.
Yeah. Oh, another thing that I could say is we've gotten comments, well, why don't you build your habitat and your simulated terrain in Second Life or make it an online kind of thing? And that might be an element of the marketing with the facility. But again, I think that you can't replace the sensation of actually being there. Especially a lot of these attractions tend to be a group experience. So it's not just you individually that are going, but it's a family or it's a whole group that's going through. And I don't know if you can readily replicate that experience with kind of an online interface. So things to think about. I mean, we're not closing the door on any of those things, but it's just not central to our current concept.
I just have one question for the person.
Okay, can I get into one of those spacesuits there and walk around all the habs and everything and feel like I'm really on Mars?
Absolutely. The idea is that the multi-day guest, they have arrived in their new home, and they're going to be oriented, they're going to have a job to do. If they go out on the surface, they're going to be in a spacesuit. In fact, in a number of ways, this project may push forward the state-of-the-art in certain technologies. So for instance, the rocket firing area, we're firing that rocket an awful lot. And so we're collecting long-duration test data that might be useful for some of the commercial providers of these rocket engines. Same thing with the spacesuits. I'm going to go to one of these spacesuit providers and place an order for 100 simulated Mars spacesuits. And they're going to be to my specification. So just the fact that I'm doing that, I'm pushing forward the state-of-the-art.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Once Spaceship 2 actually starts flying, I'd love to see a 3D IMAX film of what it's like to be in Spaceship Two.
I would as well. There's going to be a high-definition theater incorporated into this. I don't know if it's going to be IMAX per se, because it's an interesting thing you learn when you talk to the entertainment guys and you say, oh, I want an IMAX theater, and they say, no, you don't want an IMAX theater, because you have to sign just a terrible contract with them that basically you're working for them and they take all your profits. But there are other high-def technologies, screen technologies, that we can employ that don't require such terrible contract language. And we would be looking to work with these new space companies to develop unique content to show in the attraction.
The very last thing on the expansion, you mentioned suborbital flights. Would that be like a Virgin Galactic would actually launch near you, or?
Well, Kennedy Space Center is one of the oldest and most well-established spaceports in the world. So, you know, if they happen to be launching out of KSC, I'm going to look for a partnership with them.
This reminds me a lot of the Bridge of Ares design I had for the Mars Project Challenge, but one thing I had in there that I think would be useful here is that I didn't just have day guests and the longer term ones, but I also had month-to-month leases on a small apartment or the permanent residence.
Oh.
That would be like, maybe in this case you'd have them in your hotel space, but have you thought along the lines of the longer gradient to where you could just literally live on Mars, so to speak?
Well, there are two factors that affect that. One is we would have to have real solid market data that showed us that there was a market for that and that we could make good money on it. And the other is that our site, the way that it's being rezoned, it's planned industrial park, which is actually the most broad category. We can do pretty much anything we want except residential. So I'm not sure how that would play in. They might say, well, how long does a person stay there before it becomes residential as opposed to like a hotel use? But it's certainly something that we might consider in the future. Thank you very much.